Hey, you guys, how are you? How are you? How are you? Listen, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. For those of you that follow me on my YouTube, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for liking, thank you for sharing, and thank you for subscribing. For those of you that listen in on my podcast, Nonprofit Nuggets with Jennifer Yarbrough, I appreciate you for listening in yet again. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your reaching out and letting me know how much the podcast has helped you to better understand what the nonprofit space is all about. And today is going to be a very hard, direct conversations. If you guys know anything about me, you know I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you to you straight, and I'm going to be done with it. All right. So today I want to talk about why the whole start a nonprofit and you'll get a grant mindset exists. Why does that mindset exist of let me start a nonprofit so I can get a grant? And why that mindset no longer works. Okay. I know that there are people who are repeating the same thing. They're saying, start your nonprofit, you can get donors. Start your nonprofit, you can get funding. Start your nonprofit, you can get partners. But I want to address this head on. Okay. I want to address this head on without blame or without judgment. No blame or no judgment. You guys know that I've been in the nonprofit space for 39 years, and I've seen a lot happen within this space, within this industry. Um, but the belief that if you start a nonprofit, funding will come did not come out of nowhere. It was learned, it was modeled. And for a period of time, it actually worked. It actually worked. This thinking came roughly in the 1950s through the 1990s. Okay. Much of nonprofit funding, especially funding in Africa, the global South, and faith based or community work operated under a top down aid model, operated under a top down aid model. Okay. And here's what that looked like in practice. Large international donors, governments, churches, and foundations already had money. They had money, they had staff, and they had systems. And they identified needs. They identified needs: poverty, health, education, hunger. And they brought funding first, right? They brought funding to these areas and regions. And then local groups were asked to carry out the work. They were asked to distribute the services. They were asked to implement the programs, right? Um, but the financial controls, the reporting systems, and the decision making stayed outside of these local organizations. Are y'all following what I'm saying? So these big funders, these churches, these foundations, these governments, they brought money, staff, and systems. So then they found groups, communities to implement their programs. They managed the financial control. They managed the reporting systems. Who's they? They, the donors, the governmental systems, the churches, the foundations. They manage the finances. They manage the reporting. They manage the decision making. And they stayed outside the local organization. Now, this is where the unspoken lesson was absorbed by local leaders. All right. These local leaders in the African regions, they believe, and across the United States, they believe that if the need is real enough, if the need is real enough, someone with money and structure will come and pay for it. And in that environment, program activity mattered more than organizational capacity because the organization itself wasn't expected to, or they weren't held to the responsibility of long term sustainability, right? These larger groups came in, they gave them money to implement a program, but they were not given the understanding of organizational systems or capacity because they weren't expected to continue, right? That once the money was gone, the services were gone. And so this is a simple example. A large group feeds families every week. A foreign donor pays for the food, staff, overhead. And then when the donor leaves, the feeding stops. I'm going to say that again. This is a very simple example. A local group feeds families. This is many of your organizations. A donor, a funder comes in, pays for the food, pays for the staff, pays for the overhead, and as soon as that donor leaves, the feeding stops. The program worked, but the organization never had to. The organization never had to be structured. The organization never had to be sustained. And that's what happened. That in these regions, in these groups, these donors, these partners, these funders, they came in, they gave money, they found a group to implement the work. And then as soon as they left, the program stopped. What did this do? This trained dependency. This trained dependency, not failure, but it also did not train sustainability. It did not train sustainability. The same thing happened in many faith based spaces, overseas churches funded ministries, local leaders focused on serving people. And there was little expectation to diversify donors, to build reserve, to create long term funding plans, to invest in administration. And when the external donors stopped giving, the ministry collapsed. Not because the work wasn't meaningful, but because the organization was never built to stand on its own. Again, the message learned was subtle but powerful. If the work is good and God approved, then provision will come. But what was missing was the important truth that provision flows more consistently. Come with me now. Provisions flow more consistently through a prepared system. So, when and why did funders change? Here's the part that many organization or leaders don't realize. This is where many of you don't realize. Funders didn't suddenly become cold or uncaring, right? It didn't all of a sudden become Oh my gosh, we can't find donors. Oh my gosh, I can't find donors. I can't find supporters. I can't find funding. All of a sudden, it didn't become, I can't find anybody to align with my work. I can't get a partner. That's not what happened. They became more accountable. They became more accountable. The shift began in the late 1990s and has accelerated into present. And several things happened at once, right? Donors demanded accountability. Donors demanded accountability. There were lots of scandals. There was a lot misuse of funds. There were a lot of failed projects. There were a lot of organizations collapsing after grants ended. Foundations became stewards and not rescuers. Foundations became stewards and not rescuers. Boards demanded measurable impact. Donors wanted proof, not just stories. Good intentions stopped being enough. Government and large funders moved to performance-based funding. To them, outcomes mattered, reporting mattered, sustainability mattered. And the volume of nonprofit organizations exploded. Thousands of new nonprofits competing for the same dollars. And funders had to filter risk quickly. So the question that funders began to ask was no longer, is the need real? But instead, they began to ask, can the organization manage responsibly? And this is a very different question. I can remember back in the early 1990s. Now, you guys know that I've been doing this work for 49 years. I can remember back in 1990s where they had a big push for outcomes management. And I mean, millions of dollars went into this training for outcomes management. I was one of those trainers. I was one of those trainers that had to help organizations really understand how to reach outcomes, how to develop program measurement tools so that they're able to show and to prove that the money that was allocated for this particular project really resulted in an outcome. And I remember that those trainings went to the program level, right? Because it's the program that measures for outcomes. And I kept saying, this ain't right. It should start at the top. That outcomes management or outcomes measurement should be an organizational structure, not a program only structure, right? But it became a part of a requirement in the grant application. Now, that question still remains, but also what remains is the expectation that the organization has a plan, has a strategy, has a system for sustainability. But unfortunately, this old mindset has not come forward. And this is why so many nonprofit organizations are stuck, right? This old mindset is holding organizations back. Today, when a founder says, we just need funding, we just need funding, we just need a grant, we need a startup grant, we need a partner, we just need someone to come alongside us. What does the funder hear? The funder hears, we have not built an organization yet. When a funder hears, we don't have a budget. We don't know how to raise any money. We don't have a fundraising plan. We don't have board members that are helping us raise money. When a founder says, I don't have a fundraising plan, I don't know how to raise money. I don't have a board that can help me raise money. I'm funding everything out of my own pocket. We just need a startup grant. We just need funding so that we can do our program. What is the funder here? The funder hears you haven't built your organization. You know what you want to do in your program, but you've not built an organization. Today's funding assumes the donor, the grant funder, the major donor, the supporter, they assume that you have financial systems already at place. They assume that you have leadership roles already defined. They assume you have an active board. They assume that you understand what compliance is. They assume that you have a diverse funding stream. They assume that your organization can survive without a grant. That's what they assume. I want to give you all a clear example. I want to give you a 1970s model. A 1970s model. Donors bring the money. The organization runs the program. The donor manages the risk. I'm going to say that again. The donor brings the money. They find an organization to run and implement their program, and the donor manages the risk. But now, what is the model today? Today, the organization manages the risk. The donor is investing selectively. And grant supports, not sustains, the organization. Y'all, that's stewardship. That's reasonable. That's stewardship. That's reasonable. It's fair that your organization that is receiving the funds should also be put in the position to manage the risk. If the donor is investing, then the organization should be managing the risk. But this is what it looks like when programs without organization, while your good work is still being ignored or rejected. Here's where many passionate leaders get confused, right? You say, well, we're feeding people, we're housing families. The work is working. We're empowering people, right? We're helping people to grow. We're giving them the tools so that they can be sufficient. And that all may be true. But donors and funders are not funding the act of feeding or the act of housing. They are funding the organization's promise to do it responsibly over time. I'm going to say that again. They are funding the organization that promises to do it responsibly over time. A program answers, what are you doing? What are you doing? The organization, which is where many of you have not organized, you've not created the organization. You created the program. The program is what you do. The program is what you do. An organization. You started a nonprofit organization. You did not start a program. Your organization answers the question, how will this continue? Who is accountable? What happens if leadership changes? How is the money protected? How do we know this will exist next year? You can have a strong program inside of a weak organization, and funders will say no. Not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to take the risk. They can't afford to take the risk of giving you the money, and then you don't have a plan, you don't have a strategy, you don't have a system, you don't have a team, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the ability, you don't have the capacity to keep it going. It's not because they don't care. They cannot afford to take the risk. Let me say this: the executive director, your role, your job as the executive director, as the founder, as the CEO, versus a passionate helper. A passionate helper. This is probably one of the hardest but most important distinctions. When someone says, I just want to help people, Jen, you're thinking like a program worker or a volunteer. I just want to help people, Jen. You're thinking like a program worker or a volunteer. Someone who starts a nonprofit must think like an executive director, not a program worker. You must think like an executive director, which means what? Your role as the executive director is to build systems, to manage money, to oversee compliance, to lead people, to report results, to steward trust. This doesn't make you less compassionate. It makes your compassion sustainable. Wanting to help people is honorable, but leading an organization requires learning how to carry responsibility, not just intention. Here's the good news. Here's the good news, and what I hope is an encouraging truth. This shift is not about excluding small or new organizations. It's about building stronger ones. Funders didn't change to make things harder. They changed because they learned, sometimes painfully, that funding without structure creates harm, not impact. Funding without structure creates harm, not impact. You've got all this money, and then now the money's gone, and you don't know how to sustain yourself. Now you've harmed. You've harmed the organization, you've harmed the strength of the program, and you've harmed the people that were there waiting and reliant on your organization to be there. But you don't know how to keep it going. You don't know how to sustain it. You don't know how to grow it. You don't know how to fund it. That's harm. And the moment you understand, everything will change. You will see why grant rejections should make sense. Grant rejections should start to make sense. Feedback becomes useful and not, fear, right? I'm fear. What if they don't like it? No, it becomes useful. That when you understand this, the path forward becomes clearer. Burnout decreases, credibility increases. This isn't about denying need. This is about building dependency. Or no, this isn't about denying need. This is about ending dependency. It's about building organizations that last. And once you understand that, you'll stop chasing funding and start learning how to build something that funders can trust. Did you hear what I said? The moment you get it, you will stop chasing funding and start building something funders can trust. Listen, in 2026, I am on a mission to help organizations understand how to get on the right path, how to take your passion for your organization's sustainability to be as great as it is your passion for the program. I want your passion to know how to not just start your nonprofit, but how do I grow it? How do I sustain it? How do I build it? How do I lead it? How do I show and demonstrate to the funders and the donors that they can trust our organization, not my passion for this program? I want to decrease the 87 of you, 87 out of 100 of you have started your nonprofit and don't know how to run it. Jen, I don't know how to get board members. Jen, I don't know where to begin. Jen, I don't know how to structure myself. Jen, I don't know how to put together a budget. Jen, I don't know how to find board members. Jen, I don't know. I don't know how to lead the team. I don't know how to put together a sustainability plan. I don't know how to do that. But my program is important. The moment you wake up and say, I need to make sure that I'm building something that funders can trust. They know you're passionate. They're not funding your passion, however. They know you're well meaning. They're not funding your well meaning. They know you need revenue to execute, but they're not giving you their money. And you're not able to show them that you have a strong organization that can sustain itself. Those days are over, y'all. These people out here that are telling you, start a nonprofit, you can get a grant. You know what? If you start a nonprofit, you can get a grant. You know what? If all you got to do is start it and you'll be able to get partners, you'll be able to get major donors, you'll be able to get sponsors just because you got a program. That is not true. Those days are over and good. Why? Because it resulted in a lot of misused funds. It resulted in organizations being led by people with passion, but no plan for impact. No plan for impact. Impact is change. Impact is need met, not I just did good. Funders today are looking for organizations that have a sustainable structure. I am Jennifer. I provide these trainings, these tools, these opportunities for your organization to grow inwardly and to be able to share and show externally that your organization is worth the funder's trust. If they're not funding your passion, they're not funding what you want to do, they're not giving money because you need some. So if you're that person that says, Jen, I'm funding everything out of my own pocket. Jen, we don't have any donors. We don't have any funders. Jen, we don't know. We don't know how to find board members. Jen, my board is not operating. Jen, I don't even know how to define roles and responsibilities. If that's you, that's why you're having a difficult time finding donors and funders. Funding is not your problem. Money is not your problem. Money is not your problem. Your problem is your organization is not fundable. Your organization is not fundable. You don't have the system, you don't have the structure, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the capacity, you don't know how. No harm, no foul. You've never run a nonprofit. You've never led a nonprofit. You've never started a nonprofit organization. That's what's funded. The organization is funded, not the program, not what you want to do. And the moment you say, Jen, I need to understand what's funded and what's not. I need to put in place. I need to learn. I need to know how. Your organization will change like that. like that. All right? Listen, in 2026, I am looking to work with 1,000 organizations who say, Jen, I am ready to invest in the strength of my organization. Because truth be told, if your organization is not fundable, it's not attractive to a donor and a funder, it's not going to get funded. You can't learn that with Cousin Chat. You can't learn that through Uncle Google or YouTube University or over there in all them groups. You have to be taught how to run your organization. I am an expert. I am a professional fundraiser. I am a grant writer and a grant reviewer. I build nonprofits that are sustainable. If you would like help, if you would like to change, if you would like to be fundable, reach out, let me know. And I look forward to you being one of the thousands of organizations that I help this year. My name is Jennifer, your nonprofit expert. I look forward to working with you.